طيب. Chapter 25 Clarification of types of sorcery or سحر. يقول قال أحمد حدثنا محمد بن جعفر قال حدثنا عوف عن حيان بن العلاء قال حدثنا قطن ابن قبيصة عن أبيه أنه سمع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن العيافة والطرق والطيرة من الجبت. قال عوف العيافة زجر الطير والطرق الخط يخط بالأرض والجبت قال الحسن رنة الشيطان. يقول إسناده جيد ولأبي داود والنسائي وابن حبان في صحيح المسند منه. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah reported Muhammad ibn Ja'far narrated from Auf, from Hayyan ibn al-Ala, from Qatan ibn Qabisa, from his father that he heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say إن العيافة والطرق والطيرة من الجبت, meaning verily al-Iyafa, which says here letting birds fly to foretell events, and al-Tarq, drawing lines on earth to predict events, and al-Tiyara, taking sight on some object as a bad omen, are al-Jibt, sorceries, magic. This is part of magic which is forbidden. Auf rahimahullah said that al-Iyafa is letting a bird's flight foretell events, while al-Tarq is drawing lines on earth. Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah said al-Jibt is the scream of the shaitan. The above hadith has been narrated through good chain of narrators and collected by Abu Dawood and Nasa'i and Ibn Hibban. So this is again, since the previous chapter was about sihr, so now more clarification to other forms of sihr that falls onto the same category that people need to be warned against, to see that this is something that negates the Tawhid. So it shows that it's not permissible to claim that a person knows the future, as the soothsayers, as someone would do al-Iyafa, right? That he would, the birds when they're flying, that he would predict whether this would say something in the future or not. Also it shows that it's forbidden to do a tarq, which is all things that they would use to see what's going to happen in the future. A tiyara, to be pessimistic, or to have these omens, bad omens and things of that nature. This is all not permissible, because everything is in the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no such a thing as bad omens, and it has an effect into the life of the people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the qadr is by the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Person waking up in the morning, he sees something, he becomes pessimistic, bad omen, this and that. This is all minor shirk. Why? Because the person's heart is attached to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ said that all of these things is from al-jibt, from sorcery. So it's not just one thing, there are more than one type, as we heard. Rannat al-shaytan, which is al-ranna, or the voice, or the loud voice, right? Comes under it, as the ulama they say, the musical instruments. This is the voice of the shaitan. This is mazamir al-shaitan, right? So in this hadith even is an evidence that these things that makes the person away from the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes under the voice of the shaitan, right? Because he deviates people with these types of musical instruments and so on. The next hadith, عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من اقتبس شعبة من النجوم فقد اقتبس شعبة من السحر زاد ما زاد. رواه أبو داود بإسناد صحيح. Abu Dawood reported in his book with Sahih Isnad that Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما narrated that Allah's Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم said, whoever learns a part of النجوم, astrology, which means drawing knowledge from stars that has nothing to do with physical means, has learned a part of sorcery. Those who learn more are getting that much more, meaning sin to their credit. The knowledge of al-nujum, right, is that when people would take the stars as means of getting to know the future, right, which is well-known thing that people do and study and so on. So the falling of the star means this is going to happen and this of that nature, or even this star means that there's going to be rain These things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make it as means. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create the stars as means of what's going to happen on the face of earth, whether it's in the future or whether even physical things that would happen like rain and so on. So anybody that take a mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create it as a mean, then he is falling into the shirk. So that means it's forbidden for people to do this thing of astrology, which is dealing with stars in a way that is not permissible. But if people study the stars and get to know the names of it, of the ones that discovered it, and this has this place, and this has this place, and the Milky Way, and all these types of things, there's nothing wrong with that. But once it becomes a way for them to predict the future, or to get to know how it's going to rain and this and that, then it falls into the category of shirk. But seeking it, as it's mentioned in the Quran, seeking it as a guide for travelers, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing. It's a physical mean that a person can use. So these things are permissible. The other ways are definitely a form of shirk when it is not that. It has nothing to do with rain, has nothing to do with the future. Because these things are in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, it shows that it's type of sihr. It's a type of sorcery, because this chapter is mentioning the different types of sorcery. And the more the person learned this, the more that he indulged himself into the sihr, as the Prophet ﷺ said, zada ma zad, that the more he gets of this, the more he get himself into the sin. Then the Prophet ﷺ said the next hadith, وَلِلنَّسَائِيِّ مِنْ حَدِيثِ أَبِي هُرَيْرَةَ مَنْ عَقَدَ عُقْدَةً ثُمَّ نَفَثَ فِيهَا فَقَدْ سَحَرَ وَمَنْ سَحَرَ فَقَدْ أَشْرَكَ وَمَنْ تَعَلَّقَ شَيْئًا وُكِلَ إِلَيْهِ. Whoever tied a knot and blew on it has committed sorcery. And whoever committed sorcery has committed shirk. Whoever wears an amulet or talisman will be subjected to its control. He will be entrusted to it. It means it's never going to benefit him. So this is what the sorcerers do. They make knots with threads and so on, and they would blow in it with their breath, right? And this is something that is less than having it heavy coming out. If a person do that, he committed sihr. He had fall into the sihr. Why? Because the shayateen has to help him. If he would be effective, that means he has to fall into the shirk. And whoever hangs on something for its help, he's seeking help in a talisman or an amulet, right? Is that thing that he hangs around his neck would benefit him? Does it have a physical mean to help? Of course not. No one with a sound mind would say that this physically helps a person. It's not air that he breathes, it's not food that he eats, it's nothing. It's just something that he's hanging around his neck or in his arm. Has nothing to do physically. So why people have it on? Not because it's a physical benefit to him, but because of the other means, and that's why it's shirk. If it's not a physical mean, that means what? It has to be a religious mean, something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to do, or the Prophet ﷺ. So since this is not the case, that means it's a form of shirk, because a person would have the heart attached to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as if he is worshipping other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a result of that, whoever hangs it, he will be entrusted to it. Let him benefit him then. It would not benefit him. And instead, if he turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if his heart is attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be sufficient for him. So this is a clear evidence that these things are haram. And we mentioned it before, and it is something that has been spread among many of the Muslims, that we have to spread the proper knowledge that these things have no benefit. It causes harm, makes the person more and more in misery, and if he dies in that state, he would never be successful, as the Prophet ﷺ said, because it's just inventing means that would make the hearts attached to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the hadith here is clearly states that. And also the benefit of it, that whoever depend with his heart on other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is in astray, he's in deviation. He would never be successful. That the believers should put their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. See how the deen has been protecting the heart of the Muslim from having any way of depending on one's heart on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of our affairs. Also عن ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ألا هل أنبئكم ما العض هي النميمة القالة بين الناس. Shall I not tell you what al-'adh is? Then the Prophet ﷺ explained it. because this literally means lying, sorcery, and so on. This is the literal meaning of it. So the Prophet ﷺ defined it for them. He said, it is conveying false rumors, namima, for the purpose of causing disputes between people. And this is something as if it's part of sorcery, as if namima is part of sorcery. Why? Because it has the same effect like the sorcerers, causing and spreading harm by making the hearts different against one another and causing corruption on the face of earth. This is the same thing that sorcery does. So it shows that it's haram, that it's not permissible, but it's not a kufr like the sihr is, right? It's a sin, major sin, to go around with spreading rumors and spreading lies, but it's not a kufr like those who would deal with the jinn. Those who would deal with the jinn to spread sorcery and so on, they are falling into kufr, disbelief. And that's also, he mentioned here, like some of the types of sihr. Some of it is kufr, and some of it has the same effect, but it's not in the kufr level. It's a sin and definitely not permissible. And the last hadith also shows another kind, which is reported by Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna min al-bayani la sihra." That in Sahih Imam al-Bukhari and Muslim, that Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma said that the Prophet ﷺ said, some eloquence can be sorcery. Some speech can be sorcery, because it has the same effect, changes the hearts. Right? A person eloquent in his speech can take the people's heart and affect them and changes them. Right? So it shows that this is, if a person is deceiving them, if a person is deceiving the people and he's depending on his eloquency in speech, this is a form of sihr. Of course, this is not necessarily something that is kufr, but it shows this is another type of sihr. And it shows also that not everyone that can affect the people in his speech, that means he's on the truth. It's a very important benefit, right? The truth, is the subject of what being said, not the way that a person is presenting himself, not his humbleness, not his ibadah. All of these things definitely are means to make it easy for people to accept the truth. But if people would only attach themselves to the speaker and they forgot about the truth, that this is the goal of listening to him, this can be very deceiving. This can act like the sihr into the hearts, make them follow him blindly. They have no idea what he's saying, but because they like how much or how nice he speaks. And this is a big fitna that a person has to avoid. As Imam Malik rahimahullah, he said, وَكُلَّمَا جَاءَنَا رَجُلْ أَجْدَلْ مِنْ رَجُلْ تَرَكْنَا سُنَّةَ النَّبِيِّ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ. He said, is that every time someone comes and he's more eloquent in his speech, better than another, we leave the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? This is what the human beings do if they don't take it upon themselves to follow the truth. Someone that is very eloquent in his speech, they would leave the sunnah, and they would follow him because he speaks nice. He convinced them that this is all, it makes sense, and he brings maybe stories to accompany and makes the person very excited and so on. Then he leads them to the hellfire. So how can we prevent ourselves from this? That we need to stand firm on the principles of this deen. That the truth is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, what the Prophet ﷺ said, how this deen was practiced at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the early generations of Islam, and this is easy to find out, and not just to follow what sounds good, what feels good, what looks like a good thing. This is definitely not the way of where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be. So this is another kind of sorcery that he mentioned here in this chapter. We'll stop at this point, inshallah, because of the Asr prayer, and we'll continue, inshallah ta'ala, after Asr. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam.